New England Patriots fans, the Pats 53-man roster for 2022 has been set. The practice squad has been set. But are the Patriots better stocked on offense or on defense? This and more on today's episode of Locked On Patriots. We are back, and you're about to be locked in to the Locked On Patriots podcast.
You are Locked On Patriots, your daily New England Patriots podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all of you Foxborough faithful, and thank you once again for making Locked On Patriots a daily part of your New England Patriots coverage, and of course your first listen every day. Remember, Locked On Patriots free and available on all platforms, so download, subscribe to, follow wherever you get your audio podcasts, and smash that subscribe button on YouTube where we are also available. I am your host, Mike Debate. I cover your New England Patriots for Patriots Country of Sports Illustrated. You can find me on Twitter. Let me know what's on your mind at MDABATENFL. And while you're out there tiptoeing through the Twitterverse, please be sure to follow the Locked On Patriots account as well at LO_Patriots. And it's Thursday, folks, not quite midweek, but we are still finding virtue in the middle, because joining me here today to break down all of the New England Patriots roster madness is the esteemed Countess of Clare herself, columnist extraordinaire from Pat's Propaganda, and the host of her very own Patriots podcast, a Clare Perspective of Patriots podcast, who right now is putting out one of the finest segments you'll find in sports media anywhere. Her three-part series on women in sports is absolutely phenomenal. I highly recommend checking it out after you've listened to this pod, of course. She is ClazzyClare Cooper. Claire, thank you so much for joining me today from across the pond.
No, you're very welcome, Mike. Thank you so much for having me back still, time after time.
What better way to spend the week than to spend it with you, Countess? That's exactly what we love here on Locked On Patriots. It's always my honor and my privilege to share the microphone with you. And folks, I know it's been a minute since we've shared the microphone here on Locked On Patriots, especially on YouTube. Some severe technological problems over the last couple of days, but we've gotten those taken care of. And thank you so much for hanging in there with us as we continue to try to bring you the best Patriots coverage you'll find anywhere. And we do our best to do that every single day. One of the reasons why we do it, and one of the reasons why we're able to do it, is because of great guests like Claire and our guy Murph and all of the great guests that I always have here on Locked On Patriots. Claire, let's dive right in. The story of the day is the story of the week. The New England Patriots have set their 53-man roster for 2022. A lot of surprises for the Patriots. No huge shocks, but minor surprises, I would say, in some of who they let loose, some of who they kept on the roster, and of course, some of those players that people were unfortunately not happy to see go on Tuesday, returned on Wednesday by the practice squad. But you've looked at this roster from start to finish. You've looked at the way the Patriots have stocked the offense, stocked the defense. We're going to get into that in a little bit, but just your initial gut reaction when you saw the 53-man roster. What surprised you most in terms of who remained on the roster and in terms of who got let loose?
I think my biggest surprise, my personal biggest surprise, and it was an initial gut reaction, as you said. It wasn't, kind of contemplated or anything. As soon as this guy got released, I was like, oh, and didn't think about it, was Kevin Harris. Because of him being a reasonably kind of high-ish draft round pick. I think he was the 4th round, if I'm remembering right. But, my memory's like folks. But the fact that he was drafted this year, the fact that I'd heard good things. I mean, I have to say, I've been much more of a champion of Kevin Harris than I have even Pierre Strong. I know that Strong is, he's very popular, good player. I'm not knocking it. Don't get me wrong. But I was kind of, when you've got two players like that, you always gravitate towards one or the other. And I have to say, Kevin Harris was the one that sort of kind of cut it for me. So when he was released, I was quite surprised. Obviously, there's that initial, because he's the one that I sort of would have picked kind of thing. But when you contemplate that sort of the move that they made? Is it kind of a case of they need to get down to a 53? You've got Ty Montgomery on possibly short-term IR. We don't know yet. It's not happened. We're just speculating, granted. But you've got two very significant players in regards to Montgomery and Thornton possibly going to short-term IR. Is it a case of they've moved him to the practice squad and they're going to move him back? So they didn't think anybody would pick him up, that sort of thing. So when you think about it more logically, when you have more time, it does look quite reasonable. That's fair enough. Hopefully he'll stay within, and he is, he's, as we record this, he's on the practice squad. So my initial gut reaction was, oh no, but then it's like, oh well, sort of thing. So it wasn't, I think it was my biggest surprise actually in regards to Cut. I think he was definitely a name that I'd got on my 53 for certain, but I think I had more running backs anyway. I think I was at a 5 running back core anyway. So he was always making mine. I know I didn't put one out there, folks. So this is, you're just going on my notes. But he was a name that I always had on my list, sort of thing. So that, I think that's why it surprised me, personally, me myself. I know that the little Jordan Humphrey one was a surprise, kind of out there in Pat's fan nation. Got to admit, not big on my side. I was very like, oh, okay, good player again.
You called it last week.
I don't like to do the I told you so dance or anything, but but I know from a fan aspect that was a surprise for a lot of people, less so for me. But again, the Montgomery Thornton thing, moving them onto short-term IR, it just gives the extra roster spots availability. So you've got Humphrey on the practice squad as well, I believe. So it makes a little bit more sense when you sort of look at it after the fact, the same way that the Kevin Harris thing does. So I have to say, from my perspective, Chasen Hines, I didn't really see much of him. Now, that's me saying I didn't see much of him, not that we didn't see much of him. And that's just from a personal aspect of, I don't recall really seeing much of him. Now, that might be because you can only watch so many guys at once, in all fairness.
Right.
So, and he's just not an individual that I saw a lot of. I wasn't at practice, as we know. So he isn't an individual that I could really report much on. So hopefully maybe you could chime in a moment and sort of give us a little bit of information on him.
As luck would have it, I can.
Just before you do, the one individual that he surprised me being on the roster, and the individual that is now, I believe, on the practice squad anyway, but surprised me, was Cody Russi. I actually thought he would be there instead of him. He's a name that on my 53 would have made it, whereas Chasen Hines, as I said, hadn't really seen much of, so he wasn't going to make mine. But again, I'd like to reiterate, because I didn't know much about the player rather than anything against the individual himself.
Absolutely. Excellent points. And we'll get into the offensive line in a moment, because that was my biggest surprise. For all intents and purposes, carrying Chasen Hines was something that I didn't predict, and I don't think a lot of people did predict. This was a surprise to a lot of people, but I had the good fortune of being able to write a little bit on Chasen yesterday for Sports Illustrated, and the more I looked at it, the more it made a lot more sense. And that's exactly what the thrust of my article was, is that Chasen wasn't simply the benefit of having a rookie deal, reason why he was put on this roster logistically, and I will get into that in just a second, folks. But I did want to come back to your point on little Jordan Humphrey, because I think that in a lot of ways, myself included, we fell in love with the statistics that he put forth in preseason. We looked at it, led all receivers, it was on the receiving end of some great catches, great connections with Bailey Zappi, made a dynamic play on special teams, in the coverage game against the New York Giants. So naturally, people are looking at these things and they're saying, this guy already looks like a Patriot. He's versatile. He's doing it all. Our good friend Evan Lazar of Patriots.com made a very good point very shortly after it was revealed that Lil Jordan had been released from the team, I should say, on Tuesday. And he said a lot of what Lil Jordan Humphrey was able to do in preseason, as a matter of fact, most of it was on the receiving end from Bailey Zappi. Very, very seldom got any play with Mac Jones. And that is something that is telltale. When you don't get a whole lot of play with the starting quarterback, it generally is an indication of how they feel your, not so much your talent level, because I think that Will Jordan's talent level is up there, but I think where they see his development level at the point. So maybe they believed he needed a little bit more seasoning at this point to try to be a contributor. He may end up being a call up on this roster, but if he's not, I think the practice squad is the perfect spot for him. Very good point on that.
Thank you. The other name that I know that sort of is out there in Pats Nation, if you like, that a few people are quite kind of puzzled by is Jelani Tavai making the roster.
Mm,
Sort of, I know from hearing plenty that he's a bit of a Bill Belichick sort of favourite-ish, but
mhm.
he is a name that again it drops down on my list, and I wouldn't have put on my 53. I don't recall hearing his name much or seeing his name much on the preseason. Now, that could mean absolutely nothing because preseason is preseason. It's just,
Right.
we see what we see sort of thing. But I think that's another name that surprised people, especially when you've got people. And now I know it's positional, it's different, but when you're looking at literally just a roster spot perspective, Justin Bethel not being on
Mm,
that serious veteran presence. I know just special teams, and a lot of people don't necessarily put as much weight in special teams, but when you lose a accredited veteran like that, and then they say that Jelani Tavai has made it, it's a bit like, okay. So no
mm.
Bethel, but it was another name that I think was definitely out there in Pats fan nation that was a bit of a puzzlement, a bit of a surprise. But as you said at the start, there wasn't masses of shock and awe. There wasn't the drops of big names that we saw because maybe there isn't the depth of big names that they could drop them anyway, sort of thing. So a lot of people 53 was probably very close to what actually happened just with the change of one or two. And I think Bethel maybe would have been a name that most people had on their 53,
Mhm.
and less maybe Tavai.
Yeah. Bethel was definitely a huge surprise as well. And if you look at the reasons for Justin not making the final cut on this team, it really, I think, became a numbers crunch and I think a youth movement for the Patriots and special
Yes.
teams. When you look at
Yeah.
guys like Brendan Schooler now getting onto this roster, DeMarcus Mitchell getting onto this roster, I know technically he's going to be listed as either a linebacker or a defensive end when it comes to the Patriots roster, but this guy is a core special teamer, and Cody Davis is still someone that has a very specialized role, whereas you can replicate, not necessarily equal, what Justin gave you on the field, because Justin, in my opinion, is, with the exception of Matthew Slater, one of the best special team players I've ever covered. He truly is an amazing, amazing talent, always in the right place, always at the right time. And I use this phrase often, and I say it's not by happenstance, it's by design, it's by skill. That to me sums up Justin Bethel, one of the great special teams coverage players that you'll ever find, and a truly great guy as well. So I'm going to miss him because I always kept a sharp eye on special teams. It's a position that has always been, or a phase in the game, I really should say, that's always been
Yeah.
near and dear to my heart. And I wish him nothing but the best. I was hoping maybe the Patriots might want to bring him back on the practice squad, but when he put out his goodbyes on Tuesday afternoon, the handwriting was on the wall for Justin. So
Yeah.
unfortunately, that is indeed the case. And you mentioned Tavai. Tavai wasn't a big surprise for me. I did not have him on my 53-man roster projection. There's still way too many coverage liabilities that lead me to believe that this could be a problematic addition to the roster. But Bill Belichick is a big fan of Jelani. Definitely, his build is very, much conducive to a Bill Belichickian type linebacker. But there
Yeah.
is also the veteran presence. I think the work ethic definitely impresses Bill. So, is that enough for him to carry a spot on this roster? Time is going to tell. I think this is a one that everyone should keep their sharp eye on. Bill Belichick knows a lot more football than most of us will ever learn in our lifetime, but at the same time, you do kind of question some of the moves. So good stuff when it comes to the New England Patriots roster, folks. Some questionable moves, but Claire and I are going to have our sharp eyes fixated on the Patriots roster. Claire, you mentioned Chasen Hines just a moment ago, and he is one of 10 rookies the Patriots are carrying on this roster. But Interesting tidbit regarding the Patriots roster: they have the second oldest in the league. How is that possible with 10 rookies? Claire and I are going to get into that subject in just a moment, and Claire's thoughts on how the Patriots plan on utilizing these 10 rookies when this episode of the Locked On Patriots podcast continues. But first, Claire, it's almost time for the NFL season. The start of the NFL season is almost here. I love this time of year. I know you love this time of year. It's the best time of year, folks. It really, truly is. And if you're into sports betting or fantasy, you need a competitive edge to win. And that's why I highly recommend the Elias Game Plan app. It's the ultimate sports betting and fantasy companion for the NFL, the NBA, and Major League Baseball. Elias Game Plan is the only sports app from the most trusted name in sports statistics, the Elias Sports Bureau, the official statisticians of the U.S. pro sports leagues, including the NFL. Their app lets you access team and player stats, head-to-head team comparisons, and Elias insights from the Elias Sports Bureau's research team. The app is really your one-stop source for player news, league-validated player statistics, and team records. Expert game analysis for betting, building your fantasy team, and at the same time, you can even impress your friends with all of your newfound knowledge. And with new features like player injury analysis available all the time, you can take your game to the next level. NFL season is right around the corner, folks, so don't wait. Download the Elias Game Plan app today, and right now, I have a special offer when you subscribe. Get a 14-day trial off a monthly subscription plan, but only if you use my promo code LOCKEDONNFL. That's all one word, LOCKEDONNFL. Find Elias Game Plan Sports Betting in the App Store or Play Store today and use my promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Patriots fans, the illustrious ClazzyClare Cooper joins me today from Pat's Propaganda and a Claire Perspective of Patriots podcast. Claire, we're breaking down the Patriots 53-man roster, breaking down all of the ins and outs. The practice squad has been set, and coming into our second segment here, I teased an interesting fact that was put out there on Wednesday morning, something I never would have guessed after seeing that the Patriots were going to carry 10 rookies on the roster, that this is the second oldest roster in the NFL. Well, if you look at it, it's skewed. That's really, I think, a misrepresentation of this roster. You've got guys like Matthew Slater, Devin McCourty, and Brian Hoyer that are weighing down the opposite end of the spectrum. They're all younger than me, but they're still all old men. So when you look at what the roster is representative of, that's a little misleading, folks. So the Patriots roster is not as old as you may think it is, but I digress. The Pats roster does carry 10 rookies. And Claire, you know as well as I do, that comes with high reward potentially, but it also potentially comes with high risk. Your reaction to the Patriots carrying these many rookies, is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Or does virtue lie somewhere in the middle?
Well, I'm glad you asked me like that, because initially when we sort of offline, when we were looking at kind of doing the show today, you know, with the technical problems and this, that, and the other, I didn't even realize there was 10. I'd miscounted my rookie, so I hadn't even got a whole 10. So I'd missed the R against a couple of people. So I'm glad you sort of set me right on that. So yeah, I do like that they're carrying the sort of the UDFA torch. You know, they're carrying that on, that they've still got that with DeMarcus Mitchell and Brandon Schooler. Although, have you seen Schooler's profile picture? He looks older than his age. I was like, with his mustache and his long hair, it was like, are you sure he's an UDFA? He looks a bit too old to be an UDFA. But I mean that with no disrespect, you know, great guy and everything. But yeah,
he's trying not to get carded, Claire. There's a reason.
Oh, for okay. That's a good one. I like that. That's good. I can't see him getting carded, but bless him. But yeah, I mean, the team's getting younger, as you said, and it's what fans have kind of cried out for with bated breath is to get this youth movement. The fact that it's still technically one of the older teams in the NFL is freaking crazy right now. But yeah, you've got like Hoyer and Nick Folk and stuff, as you said, really kind of skewing the dial sort of thing. But yeah, to think that they've got 10 rookies and they're still one of the older teams. I'm guessing the oldest team has got to be the Bucs with Brady really swaying the needle completely. But the thing that sort of struck me when it sort of all came to fruition that it's 10 rookies and, you know, it's 10 really young guys on the team. And that's a considerable, chunk of the team, is this need for the continuation of the rebuild, as people like to say. And I did put it in inverted commas there, folks, for those of you that are listening and not watching, because there's so much controversy between how long it takes to rebuild, if they are in a rebuild, what your opinion wants to be of it. But if you are saying that they are in a rebuild, youth is a big thing, because a rebuild is building up the team for the future. What you've got to look at is who's going to be with the long term. It's solidifying the team for the future. It's all very well looking at the veterans, that were part of the Super Bowl dynasty and stuff, but what they've got left, granted old isn't really old, but it's just old in NFL terms. They're not going to be able to carry on the culture, continue the New England culture past a couple of years. And what we're looking at now, hopefully behind Mac Jones, is we're looking at how to build the future of the Patriots. And to do that, you need to get a lot of rookies in so that they get the experience, behind Bill Belichick and that sort of thing, to build what you want as the Patriots way. And the only way you're going to do that is with youth that are able to stay around for a long time. Now, that in itself is kind of key, because it's all very well having a lot of young guys come in. You risk, as you mentioned, the inexperience sort of thing of the youth movement, and how that can be detrimental to a team and to the progression of the team. But you've got to find the balance. You need those individuals that you're going to see, that are going to see the team forward and going forward into the future. So it has to happen at some point. You've got to have a large section of youth in at some point. You can't drip feed it, because if you do, you'll never really fully solidify it for the future. If you've only got one or two young guys coming in and coming out, you're always going to be in sort of a stasis. You're not really going to have that rebuild. You're not really going to have the mentality and the culture progressing on for the future, because you'll get to a point where it's been diluted so much, because there's so many individuals that don't know of it, that there isn't anything to continue. Because we all know Bill Belichick isn't going to be the coach forever, but you'd like to think that the Patriots way is going to last forever, because it's been so successful. And I know a lot of people will say that to do with Tom Brady. That's a completely different conversation than what we're having right now. It's just the way that the Patriots are going to evolve as a team. And you'd hope that they'd maintain some of what just makes the Patriots the Patriots. And that isn't just what Tom Brady was about. It's what the team is about. It's what the organization is about. So yeah, maybe virtue lies in the middle in regards to if it's a good or a bad thing. Because as you mentioned, and as I just said, you do sound off in regards to youth and inexperience. Could it be detrimental because you haven't got that as much veteran presence? But I think they've made a decent balance, because there is still veteran presence. There's rookies and there's veterans on both sides of the ball. So you're looking at building it on both sides. So that's good. It's not just sort of all one and all the other. So you've just got age on one side and youth on the other, that sort of thing. So I think it's a case of, it's, to me, in my opinion, in my perspective, it's a good thing. Because we needed this team to get younger. We needed this team to, I hate to say it, get quicker. And no disrespect to any of the guys out there, because I know that we say these old guys, they're not old at all. They're younger than most of us, all of us put together, that sort of thing. But athletes get slower as they get older, other than Tom Brady, we all know. But athletes get slower as they get older, and we see this, and the speed, and that was a key issue with the Patriots last year. Regardless of age, they didn't seem to have the dynamic spark, that the speed that was needed. And I know that they've addressed that in regards to that. And that's another sort of thing in regards to the rookies making it, is they're just looking at the youth with the speed aspect and what's needed as the game of football evolves within the NFL, and the way that it's played is more dynamic, is more speed orientated. So you're going to get younger players, because you're going to need that sort of youth speedness towards it. Now, there's going to be guys, obviously, that are older that have still got speed, and I'm not knocking those ones at all. So, right. But you're using it as a focus to talk about is the rookies. And yeah, in my long-winded way of saying, I think it's a good thing, Michael.
I think it's a good thing as well. Look, bottom line, the New England Patriots needed to get younger at certain positions in order to be able to compete in the NFL the way the modern game is played. Linebacker was one of those. They have gotten younger at linebacker. No
Yeah.
question about it. Mac Wilson, almost said Mac Jones. And yeah, Mac's going to play every position this year, folks. Mac Wilson, definitely. Anthony Jennings. The influx of youth into this position, I think, is so good in terms of being able to bring speed and bring that lateral sideline to sideline movement. Look for guys like Josh Uche to take a step up. I was really looking forward to seeing Ronnie Perkins this year and to see what he can do. Obviously, we're going to have to wait until 2023 to see what he's capable of. But at the same time, the Patriots are moving in that direction. A lot of youth at the cornerback position, no question about it. Marcus Jones, Jack Jones. These guys are not just going to be red shirt freshmen this year, folks. They're going to get playing time. They're going to be in the thick of things. And I really look forward to seeing Marcus help out Miles Bryant in the slot this year. I think that's going to be an option. And don't be a bit surprised to see Jack taking snaps on the perimeter before the end of the year. But the one guy that really, I think, surprised me that he was on the roster, and I hinted at this in the previous segment, was Chasen Hines. And you mentioned about Chasen being able to make the roster. Initially, I thought maybe too much time had passed for him being on NFI and being activated to really show the Patriots brass enough to be able to make the roster. I thought solid practice squad addition, but probably not going to be someone that's going to crack the 53-man. Then I went back yesterday and I looked a little bit at some of my notes on Chasen and how he was able to emerge, the blocking schemes that he used, the fact that he aligned at every position on the offensive line at one point during camp and during preseason really stood out to me. This is a guy that's very versatile, that can play all different areas. And as much as I love Cody Rossi, and I know Murph was one of the guys that turned me on to him during the draft process, Cody is a center. He can switch over. He can play guard, but Chasen can play all three positions. He can play the middle. He can play the ends, and he can play the tackle position. And that's something that I think really endeared the Patriots to him. The other part that you got to love about it is a never-ending work ethic. This kid just constantly keeps pressing at it. He'll do whatever you need him to do. And at the end of the day, the Patriots spent a 6th-round pick on Chasen Hines, whereas Cody Rossi was an undrafted free agent. So all of that factors in. But when you look at the talent that the Patriots have brought in, especially in this year's draft, I know the draft's taken a lot of heat and a lot of hits lately. And believe me, there have been some misses, Devin Asiasi. But I shouldn't really say that. Devin played his heart out while he was here. I really, really do like Devin as a person, one of the great guys that I've had a chance to be around. But I think he needed a new scenario, a new change of scenery, and I think he'll do well in Cincinnati. But to me, I think that really is where this is going for the New England Patriots. So the youth infusion, folks, is definitely a good thing that the New England Patriots are doing. Don't know where that came from, Claire, but she laughs at it, and I always appreciate it. It makes me feel less like, well, whatever. We'll keep it clean because it's a family show here on Locked On Patriots, but I thank you for that insight. But, folks, we're not quite done yet. We're going to wrap things up here very shortly on Locked On Patriots, but Claire is going to give her perspective, see what I did there, on whether or not the Patriots are better suited on offense or on defense. What is this roster shaping up like? We conclude this episode of the Locked On Patriots podcast in just a moment. Folks, are you one of those people who thinks it's okay to drive stoned? What's the worst that can happen, you might say to yourself? You end up driving below the speed limit? It's no big deal, right? Wrong. The truth is, your reaction times slow very much down when you're high. You not only put yourself in danger, but you put everyone around you in danger. Stop kidding yourself. It is not okay to drive high. If you've been using marijuana in any form, do not get behind the wheel. If you feel different, you drive different. Drive high, get a DUI. Patriots fans, the illustrious ClazzyClare Cooper has joined me here today to talk New England Patriots football, specifically the 53-man roster, the practice squad, all the ins and outs going on from Foxborough. It's amazing, Claire. The 53-man roster is set. The Patriots filling 15 out of 16 slots on the practice squad on Wednesday. there was an unknown offensive lineman out there on the practice fields on Wednesday wearing number 68. Identity not yet known. No, Clare. It is not Ryan Izzo. I looked into it and no, it is not Izzo in disguise. But at the same time, we're still waiting on the identity for this mystery man, and we assume that we'll learn it on Thursday. Folks, we'll give you an update as soon as we can here on Locked On Patriots once that roster spot has been filled or identified. It looks like it has been filled, but we'll identify that. I guess they're still working on negotiations, a little behind the scenes stuff. But when you look at this team now, Claire, we've talked about offense, we've talked about defense, we've talked about rookies and how this offense and defense are shaping up. Is this a better offensive roster or is this a better defensive roster heading into 2022?
Well, Mike, you know that I'm probably one of the most indecisive people you have on this show. So this was very difficult for me. Yeah, I know. This was so difficult for me.
That's why I did it, folks.
Especially, yeah. Don't you just love him, folks? Don't you just love him? Especially when I'm a bit of an offense girl. So it sways in one direction because you're talking offense. And when you're talking offense, you're talking tight ends. And when you're talking tight ends, then you're talking my favorites. But I digress. I have to say, when I look at sort of who they've brought in, who they've drafted, how they've stocked it, who's kind of injured, who's got, the short-term IRs that are possible, that sort of thing. I have to say, and looking at preseason training camp and preseason games, it does, as much as I don't want to hate, I don't say I want to hate to admit this because that's not true, because I just want the Patriots to be great regardless, but it is the defense for me. The defense is what appears at this moment. Now, bearing in mind that we are saying at this moment on Thursday, the 1st of September, the 53 has only just kind of come out. The preseason games have only just kind of finished. Training camp, practice is going to continue, but training camp is sort of done before the preseason. At this point in time, the defense seems to have it overall for me. They seem to click better. They seem to perform better. You've got the injection of youth, but you've got the rookies playing. I don't want to say not as rookies because of course they are, but you've got rookies in there that maybe you wouldn't have initially expected to be in a sort of a 53 roster spot in regards to Jack and Marcus Jones, for example, not to single those guys out, but they double dipped at that point in that slightly later in the draft. So you wouldn't necessarily expect both to make the roster, but they have. I think that's a good thing, as we mentioned earlier, because the youth movement, we do believe, is a good thing. I just think looking at everything we've seen so far, as up to today, the 1st of September, the defense have got the edge. Now, that doesn't mean to say that I've got no sort of confidence in the offense. I've still got lots of excitement in the offense. I think the unrest at the O-line is what has most fans sort of pondering what's kind of going on, with the offense. I think it's less to do with what everybody likes to call weapons in regards to the wide receivers and the running backs and the tight ends. It's kind of less that of the offense and more the offensive line, which has us of a concern, which has me looking at the defense thinking that looks stronger, that looks more pulled together. It's like the age thing, how a few older guys really sway the age in regards to the oldest in the NFL sort of thing. It's the same in that respect of the O-line feels like it's really tilting the scales at the moment. And if they were to solidify that a bit better, if we'd got a little bit more confidence, I kind of want to say, but don't want to say, in the O-line and the structure of the O-line and the depth at the O-line, then I think it'd be much more difficult to choose one over the other. Just not to really hammer home this point, but maybe if we hadn't have seen the exit of Shaq Mason, right now would be a very different conversation that we'd be having. Maybe it'd be like, look, I can't say, they both seem really good. So, I wouldn't even be able to answer the question. I'd be avoiding it completely and as much as I could. Point. But yeah, but it is what it is in regard to that. So, he's out the door and that's the thing. But yeah, to answer your question a bit more specifically, maybe less long-winded than I really should, is I'm looking at the defense as being more solid now. I think the offense just needs that bit of time. They just need to get that O-line a bit more sorted. Whether or not that means bringing someone else in, I don't know. Whether it just means time for them to be together. again, I heard something earlier today in regards to how the offensive line are brothers. I think it was TC and Phil Perry were discussing how the O line they've really got to have confidence in one another to work well together.
Right.
And although the guys probably, I'm sure they have confidence in each other, they're being switched around. So they're not really maybe getting a stability in where they're sat in regard, where they're stood, I suppose I should say, really. So I think that is really sort of hindering in regards to the O-line. So once we can get past that, however that may be, I don't have all the answers, then I think we've got a strong offense and a reasonably strong defense. So yeah, I think that's the key in regard to that. But to answer the question, sorry, yeah, for me at the moment, as of today, it's definitely got to be defense.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. And for the same reasons that you mentioned, look, I think everybody is overreacting. I don't want to say everybody, but there's a large chunk of the fan base that's overreacting on the wide receivers. Oh, we don't have the number one wide out. We lost Tyquan Thornton. We don't have that deep threat. There's still a very good complementary group of wide receivers. And folks, Tyquan will be back at some point this year. We're hoping that we see him sooner rather than later. But, that's going to be a little bit of time for him to recover from the injury. Once he does, hopefully he will bring that dynamic. You may not see it this year. It may take him a full year to get back into where he needs to be. But you look at Kendrick Bourne, you look at Devontae Parker, you look at Jacoby Myers and Nelson Aguilar. They all have unique skill sets that I think can complement each other. And when you look at the running backs and the way they complement each other, I think the skill positions are okay. The O-line is where the issue lies right now, Claire. And I think you made an excellent point on that. It helps to give Mac Jones that comfort that we're just not seeing right now.
A quick point in regards to Tyquan Thornton. So that, not to plug my show, but say you guys go over and listen to a Clare perspective. I did have the pleasure to just speak to Dr. Jessica Flynn, amazing woman. And we had a little bit of a conversation at the end of my show in regards to Tyquan Thornton and in regards to the injury that he had. Not to throw spoiler alert for people, but she mentioned in regards to roughly an 8-week recovery time is what's to be expected. But once he returns, he should be at 100%. In regard to the type of injury that he's had, it should be 100%. So when we do get him back as Patriots fans, we should touchwood get him back as Tyquan Thornton full hammer.
Absolutely. And that's good information. And Jess is the best in the business of providing that.
Oh, yeah.
And, in terms of his timing, in terms of his comfort level within the offense, that may be where more the growing pains are going to happen rather than something that's a result of recovering from his injury. So excellent point. Sure. I'm glad that you made that. But the O-line is, to me, where the comfort needs to come from. And look, some of this is on Mac as well. Mac can't turn his back and run against the grain on the defense like he did against the Las Vegas Raiders. I understand that, he anticipated the worst and you're trying to do your best to kind of come out of that, but that's not something that a quarterback really should be doing at any point. And yes, there were several arguments that'll tell you that he was driven into that. I can buy into that a little bit as well, but ultimately the Patriots need to shore that up. So by default, I think the defense gets it, but that's not something to say where, oh, well, it's just the lesser of two evils. I think this defense has the chance to be a lot better than people think. I love the way the front seven is constituted, especially the defensive front this year. Christian Barmore taking a big leap. You can definitely see that. He'll be a factor. Dietrich Wise, I think, can still be a factor on the edge, and he's got some help there this year as well. So when you look at the linebacking core, we talked about this the last time, the young guys, Raekwon McMillan, I think is going to make a big difference in that linebacking core. And then the cornerbacks, if they can hold up and they can pull their end of the bargain, I think the Patriots have the deepest safety core in the league this year with Devin McCourty, Kyle Duggar, Jabril Peppers, now Joshua Bledsoe coming into the mix, and of course my guy Adrian Phillips anchoring all that and bringing it all together as the glue and the straw that stirs the drink in that backfield. So Claire, as always, it is a pleasure. It is my honor to have you join me here on Locked On Patriots each and every week. Folks, once again, I cannot recommend highly enough all the work that Claire does. Not only does she provide the best recaps in the business of Pat's propaganda, but again, check out the Women in Sports features that she has right now on A Claire Perspective, a Patriots podcast. It is truly eye-opening, entertaining, and very, very informative. And of course, all the great work that she does each and every time she hits the microphone on A Clare Perspective, the Patriots podcast. Check out the entire library. Some of the great characters and great minds in Patriots lore have been on her show. And there's a reason for that, folks, because it's simply one of the best in the business. So, Claire, thank you for joining me today. We look forward to having you join me here again next week on Locked On Patriots, as you do each and every week. But folks, we thank you each and every day for making Locked On Patriots a daily part of your New England Patriots coverage, and of course, your first listen every day. Until tomorrow, Foxborough faithful, continue to stay safe, stay well, be the change you wish to see in the world. Have a great day, everyone.